Hi, it's Jillian and Jordan from Loveleigh Loops, and today we're talking about iPad flourishing. If you've ever tried flourishing your calligraphy on your iPad, maybe you've been a little bit dissatisfied or you feel stuck with what to do next, or maybe you have only tried the same two flourishes and you don't know what else is out there, or maybe you haven't even tried it all just because you don't know where to start. So today we're going to simplify our process and give you some really good starting points, and we're also going to give you a huge time-saving shortcut at the end. So why should you listen to us? Well, why should you listen to her? Because she's the flourishing expert on the team, and I've just been lucky enough to learn all of her secrets. And she's taught over 7,000 students how to flourish their calligraphy. She's looked at so many student examples, and so she's been able to boil down the struggles into the top two issues that people usually have when they're getting started with flourishing, which are... So the first one is shape. How do you know what shape to make your flourishes? How do you know what path to follow? And then the second one is placement. Where do you add flourishes? What are the best spots in your letters to add these flourishes? So she's kind of giving away these secrets for you in the lesson. You're going to learn a lot. Just a quick note before we get started, this is for iPad lettering. We're using an app called Procreate. We love it. And so you're more than welcome to watch if you don't have an iPad, but just wanted to let you know that it will be completely digital today. All right, let's get started with the lesson. When we look at a flourished piece, first of all, you probably have seen, if you look on Instagram or Pinterest, just the final quote that someone has created, and it looks beautiful with all these flourishes, and it probably looks really complicated or complex. Maybe you don't believe that you could do something like this yourself, but I promise you can. Also, if you see videos on Instagram or elsewhere, you might see people just like tracing or writing the whole quote with the flourishes as is, and it looks like they're just winging it. But a huge secret is that you can save a lot of time by planning out your flourishes, and then once you have it planned out, you'll know what the final design will look like. So it might sound counterintuitive, but by taking a few extra steps at the beginning to plan out your quote, you can save time and frustration later. So for example, with this quote, the Be Yourself one with flourishes, we actually started off with just this simple base quote. All it is the basic lettering, there's no flourishes. So then the planning phase is adding on the flourishes, deciding the placement of them, deciding what they should look like. And then at the end is when we trace over the final result so that we can create this beautiful piece. But I promise you, we do not start at this step. We start back at the base and then add on the flourishes as we go. So I'm going to walk you through this process using an example, and I've already created my base quote here. So step one is creating your base lettering. This is just writing out your word or phrase with no flourishes. Then we're going to look at the placement. So I'm going to start with the word happy, and then we'll do the word birthday. So for placement, what I like to do is if you're doing this on your iPad, you can use layers and colors to help you figure things out. So I'm going to use an airbrush that's called Soft Brush, and I'm just using a light yellow color, and I'm using this on a layer below my base quote. So the first thing I'm going to do is decide about where I want to fill in some space. So flourishes are really good for filling up some empty space so that you can create some balance and make sure that you're not going to interfere with the legibility. Actually, that's another reason why we start by writing out our word without flourishes, so that we can make sure the lettering is crystal clear, and then we're just adding the flourishes to extend the letters rather than completely alter them. Okay, so with the H, I see a lot of opportunity up here to add a flourish because we have some empty space above the A. We have some empty space over here on the left-hand side, so I'm just going to highlight that as a possible opportunity for a flourish. We also have some empty space to the left of it. Okay, and then the A isn't always a great one to flourish. The P is nice, so I'm gonna see like pretty much anywhere where you have something that can continue extending further than it is. Like the stem, we can continue extending it like down and to the left, maybe even to the right a little bit. This P is going to be a little bit harder to do anything with because we have something on either side and below it. And then the Y, we can maybe go a little bit to the right, or there's even opportunity to go up here. So I'd probably want to choose just one of those. I think I'll just, for now, stick with the bottom. So this first phase is just, in general, planning out where your flourishes could possibly go. Next, we're going to sketch out our flourishes on a new layer. So I'm adding a new layer. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here and take a look at each of these yellow spots where I'm planning to add a flourish and decide what it could look like. So for this H, I can make the loop. Like one easy thing you can do is just make the loop bigger. That's not technically flourishing as much as it is exaggerating or embellishing. Flourishing is usually when you extend the line with loops or curves. So that's something really simple that I could do. I can also do some sort of like entry swash that maybe like curves up like that. I could do something that goes the other way. So this was one of the struggles we talked about, was figuring out what the actual shape of the flourish should be so that it looks good, and like it can be really hard to figure that out. So, or a lot of people like know a couple of flourishes, but they don't know a ton, and so their work always ends up looking the same. This is one that looks okay. I'm just going to sort of, like, the shape doesn't look quite right, but I'll just go with it for now. It's a draft. Okay, so then I'll move on to the next letter, P. We could extend this out to the left. That doesn't really look finished though. Could wrap this back around that way maybe, but I feel like there's a lot of flatness right there. Like this line should be a little more curved. So coming up with these shapes again is not like the easiest thing to do. Sometimes you even have an idea in your mind of what it would look like, and then actually getting it to show up like that on paper can be hard, or on your iPad. Okay, and then lastly for the Y, one thing that's easy to do for descenders, like on the Y, is instead of going up at the end, you can go down, or you can go through and exaggerate that a little bit. You can even add some additional loops right here and make it bigger like that. Let's see, we can do even something like this could look nice. Okay, so then the next step you would do is trace your final copy on top on a new layer. So let's do that. So I'm going to create a new layer above my base quote, and this will be my flourished quote. So if you want, you can decrease the opacity of your layers below by opening the layer, tapping on the N, and sliding the opacity layer down a little bit just so you can see a little bit better what you need to work on. You can even hide that yellow layer like this. So then we would just go ahead and trace this. So for something like this where I have the original letter of the Y, I could, if I needed to, I could go back and go to my base quote and erase that part of the Y that I no longer need anymore, just so that when I'm tracing the final copy, I don't accidentally trace that. Even the very exit piece of it, I don't need anymore because we're extending this below. Okay, so I'm going to return back to my lettering layer and then trace this final piece. Okay, so planning out those flourishes definitely made this process a lot easier. And then I could go ahead and hide my base quote and my flourish draft, and I definitely wouldn't have been able to wing that as well as I did with planning it out. Okay, the thing is, we've actually created something, our own unique process of flourishing on the iPad that makes it way easier to do. So I'm going to show you our little secret weapon. So the first, let's go to the word birthday, and I'm gonna do the same process, but using some tools that will help me get a better result. So first of all, let's start with the B. So if you're brand new to lettering and flourishing, you might not even know like what parts of the letters you can flourish or what type of flourish you can use. Like for the H, maybe you didn't know that you could do something like that. So we have a handy little alphabet reference chart that shows some possibilities for each letter. So for the B, I could either do an entrance flourish or an ascender flourish. Now an entrance one works in this case because this B is at the beginning of the letter. So an entrance flourish would be, let's go back to my airbrush. An entrance flourish would be kind of swooping into the beginning of the B, or an ascender one would go kind of like how the H, we extended that loop. So I like the ascender. I'm going to just draw some yellow of where I could possibly fit it, making sure that the yellow doesn't overlap anything above it. The I isn't a great letter to flourish, but the T is. You can do some really cool T crossbars, so I'm gonna highlight that as a possibility. And then looking at the word birthday, I see a lot of empty space below the word, so I think the Y could be a really good opportunity to add something there. We can bring the Y to the left a bit. We could make a flourish that goes under the entire word using the Y, but one of my favorite letters to flourish is the R, so I'm gonna add a flourish on the R right here. So I was just kind of going through that alphabet reference chart in my mind of different possibilities. Like for the Y, instead of doing the descender, we could do an exit stroke, but I like the idea of a descender. Okay, let's tackle the next issue. After placement is deciding the shape. So before, what I was doing was I was just drawing out some possible flourishes in blue, but if you're completely brand new to this, or you just need some more ideas of how to flourish, or you're just not really happy with how they're looking, so I'm going to show you our little secret weapon. We're going to create a new layer, and the secret weapon is our Flourish Stamps. So for the B, I decided I want to use an Ascender Flourish. So I'm going to my Ascender Flourish set of Procreate brushes, which are stamps, and I'm going to pick, let's just pick the very first one. So when I zoom in here, and I can change the size over here on the left, I'm going to stamp down my flourish, tap the arrow so I can select it and move it, and then put it exactly where I want it to go. I can even resize it if I need. Exactly where I want it to go, and boom, I have a flourish guide already. I don't have to try it out a bunch of different times, get something that is already a, let's say, calligrapher approved flourish, something that already looks great. Okay, let's move on to the R. So an R would be a below the baseline flourish. So I'm going to my below, and let's see, like a lot of people do something sort of basic on an R. I'm going to add a new layer, by the way. I like to do these each on their own layer so that I can easily select them, move them, and resizing them independently. So this could be a good shape for the R. Let's go to the T. I'm going to add a new layer, go to my T crossbar section, and we have either flourishes that are just crossing the T like with a wavy line, or we actually have some that go directly into the H because TH is pretty common. So I'm just going to tap that TH one down, move it to where I need to go, resize it if I need. Sometimes this even gives you more ideas, like look, it looks like I can make that go right into the dot of the I, depending on how I have this sized. And that is looking pretty good. I'll just leave it there. I might need to adjust this Y flourish a little bit so that it doesn't run into my H one. And then lastly, we have the Y at the end of birthday, which the chart will tell you. You can either use a descender or an exit. I'm going to use a descender. And let's choose, let's just do number 6. Okay. So on my new layer, let's tap it down, move it to where it needs to go. I can sort of zoom out and see what that looks like in the context of the bigger picture. You know what? I think I want to use a different one. So the really fun thing about this is you can just select it, slide it off the screen, and then choose a new one. And let's do number 8. Stamp it down, move it super quick, and I think that looks great. It kind of perfectly fits into that yellow space that I had highlighted before, not even on purpose. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so like for the R, I think I kind of want something a little more fancy. It's kind of hard to think of something super fancy off the top of my head, but luckily I have all of these options in my below baseline toolkit. So I like number 6. Instead of deleting this one, because I do like that one, I'm just going to hide that layer for now, add a new layer, and then stamp this one on just to see if I like it any better. Move it into place, and yeah, I think I like that one better. But I could easily go back and forth between these two and just see which one I want to go with, and yeah, I like this one. Okay, I'm going to delete this. The one I'm not using. So see how much quicker it was to come up with really beautiful looking flourishes and have new ideas versus manually drawing it out. So this process works whether you're manually figuring out your shapes on your own or if you use this shortcut, because the last step is, again, tracing it. So I'm going to turn back on my pink layer. I can hide my yellow one and then just finish tracing my flourishes. So the alphabet reference guide that I was looking at the beginning of the word birthday to decide what flourishes I could use on my B is part of a user guide that we put together. It's a user guide and flourishing guide that goes with our stamps that shows tons of examples of how you can use these different shapes with different letters and which letters look best with which flourishes. So it's a really helpful reference for you, especially if you're brand new to flourishing, but even if you aren't new and you're just trying to figure out how you can make yours look just that much better, or find new ideas of flourishes so you're not constantly using the same two over and over. Even just like being able to trace these, you can see I'm not tracing this perfectly. I could try to go really slowly and trace it exactly, but even not tracing it perfectly, I still feel a lot more confident with how these flourishes are looking because I have that guide of my hand. I'm not just like over here with nothing to help me out, like trying to struggle my way through it. I have something helping me that a calligrapher has created, that Jordan has made just for this purpose. And now I can hide all of my other layers and I have my quote and it looks great. Oh, another little secret I have for you is this base quote I wrote for happy birthday. Didn't actually write it. We have a few different stamps in our lettering set that you can just stamp down a quote if it's happy birthday or thank you or never stop learning. You can resize these as well to make them bigger or smaller. So these are a really fun way to just get started right away with adding flourishes, and we specifically chose these quotes because they have some great opportunity for adding flourishes. So moving forward, you can take a piece that you've created in the past, whether it has flourishes on it already or something that's just written in a basic style, and use this process of planning out your flourishes, looking at the placement, deciding what shapes you want to use, and then creating a new layer for your final piece. That's just like a really huge secret that a lot of people don't know, and even though it sounds like it takes more time, it's actually going to save you a lot of time and frustration from winging it. And of course, if you want a huge shortcut, we've already put together this set of brushes, over 60 Flourish stamps that you can use, plus our in-depth user guide. Let's just go through one more example of another quote, and I'm going to show you a few ways that you can use the flourishes to combine different lines of text within a quote. So the quote that we're going to be using is, "Mistakes are proof that you are trying." So I'm going to go through the first step and write it out here, just in a basic style to have my skeleton of my words. And then we'll go through the next step of adding our flourish drafts and then finally trace the final copy. So the way I wrote this quote, you can see that there are some empty spaces, and I made some of them like this on purpose. I'm going to show you why in a second. I want to show you how I'm going to combine some lines of text together. So some major areas that we see white space are right here. There's a little bit up under the word mistakes in between these two lines. And then there's some over here at the end of the word. And then there's a little bit right here. So one of the first things that I always look at is the T crossbars. So I'm just going to highlight the T crossbars here and show you a way that you can combine lines of text. So if I go to my T crossbar section, the basic way of crossing through a T is with a wavy line like this. So I put my flourish on a new layer and just placed it right here. So I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to then add a new layer and show you on this P, we could add a descender down here, or we could do something with this R, but I'm going to show you on the P. If we choose a descender, and let's just choose number 4 right here. So I'm going to place this on the P and make it bigger. So one thing that you might notice is when I'm placing this down, that the shape of the crossbar of the T and this part of the flourish on the descender of the P are pretty similar to each other. They have that wavy line like this. So I'm going to hide both of those, and going one step further, just remind you that under the T crossbars, some of them connect with an H. If you have TH, that would be an A sender. So if I place that down and move it over, you can see this combination of TH. Okay, let's bring back that descender flourish we had. And now you can see that this descender then mimics the shape of this ascender part that goes into here. So combining that all together, we can create a shape that will end up looking like this. So we'll start with the descender and come out this way. Then we'll transition into the T crossbar that goes into the H. And now what we've done is we have connected the P, the T, and the H. And I just think that is so fun to do. Whoops, I have a stray mark right here. I'm just gonna hide those 2 or 3 layers that I had there. Okay, so you can see how it's really fun to connect different lines together. And there's another place we could do something similar. On this Y going into this T. So anytime you have a descender in a row of text and then a T crossbar right under it, you can maybe start to see why I chose to put this word that has a T in it under this descender and this word that has a T in it under this descender. So just another example. Let's go back to our descender flourishes. I have the same one selected just to see the basic shape. I'll place it here, resize it. And of course this might need some adjusting, moving around. Maybe you would need to make this bigger or possibly move the word U over to the right so that the crossbar crosses through the T. So if I go back to my lettering layer and select the lettering, I could always move that over so it matches up with the descender. Maybe the descender could go a little more to the left. And those will connect together like that. So roughly that will end up looking like this. And we might have to make the T, the base of the T, a little bit taller, like that. Okay, so that will be finalized when we do our final copy, but I'm just showing you what these connections look like. So now let's look at the other areas of the words that have those spaces. And before I said that I wanted to do some T crossbar flourishes. So I'll just choose this one and make the crossbar on this T. I do have another T right here, so I'm just going to duplicate that layer since I already have it down and move it to this T. Could move it over, maybe resize it. So you could either purposely cross it through this H right here. If I zoom in, you can see what that looks like. You can purposely cross it through so it goes through. And why don't we just leave it like that so we can see what that looks like. The other option would be to move it over so it doesn't cross through. But let's purposely cross it through. We'll have to adjust the height of this T. Okay, and then we have some more room. I didn't draw any yellow here, but we do have some room under the word trying that we could play around with. We also have the end of this right here. So here we could either do something like a below the baseline flourish on the R. So that would be a below, maybe something like this. Get a little bigger to fill up that space. Or we could try to see what it looks like if we have an exit flourish, maybe like this. I'm going to hide the one I just did on the R. Notice how I'm still making every flourish on a new layer. So the way that this one works with the G, it's not going to match up exactly. The shape of this part right here, you can see where it fades is where it connects to the letter. That would work more seamlessly with a letter like E, where it finishes with this curved shape, whereas the G just finishes with the line coming out like this. So you just kind of have to imagine. I would look more at where the flourish is actually placed, and then you can always go back and fix where the connection is. So if I go to my lettering brush, this would connect seamlessly like this. Okay, so you would kind of ignore this curved part right here. So I'll just hide that one. And then where else can we add something? Under this area right here, we could maybe add a flourish coming off of the M. So that would be a below the baseline flourish. I'm gonna add a new layer, go to my below section, and let's see what this one looks like. Stamp it down, make it bigger, move it over. We could try this one. Kind of mimicking that long wavy line that we're seeing here and here. And there's not some space right here that I'm seeing. So we could either bring something down from the A or the K, or we could try bringing a ascender flourish on this F right here. So let's see what that looks like. Stamp that down and place it. And then let's just add a simple flourish on this Y right here, just to round out the piece. Try number 5. Just gonna rotate it a little bit and make it bigger. So I don't want it to run into this G. Okay, let's take a step back. I'm gonna turn off my yellow layer here. And so one more thing with this area, it seems like there's some empty space kind of here. So a couple things we could do. We could make this part of this descender flourish a little more complex and add another loop. So if I go to my descenders and let's scroll down to number 8 here, make a new layer and stamp that down. And here's a way that we can make this P have another loop. So I'm gonna hide what we had before, just so you can see this by itself. This P is gonna come down and have 2 loops in it. Then we can cross through the T and go into the H. Okay, so if I go back to turn this layer back on, I'm gonna select what I had here and move it off. Okay, then with my lettering brush, I'll just follow this path and make 2 loops, then go through the T and into the H, like that. Okay, so now we have flourishes everywhere. Just to make it more simple, I'm gonna delete the layers that we didn't use so there aren't so many here, all of the ones that don't have their checkboxes turned on. Okay, now we'll add a new layer on top of all of this. And I'm gonna turn the opacity of my original lettering down just a little bit so that I can trace the final copy on the brand new layer. And I'll just change the color so it's something different. And I'll trace over all of these letters and add in the flourishes as I go. So I just traced over my P and I added this double loop flourish that goes into the crossbar and down through the H. You can see that it would have been pretty hard to do that if I didn't plan this out and write my words and add my stamps ahead of time, but having that guide made it a lot easier so I know where I'm going. And then when I come back in to add this T, I know exactly where it's going to end up. Before I had my T going through this H, but I think I'm just going to keep it off to the side and not have it cross through the H. A trick to only show the layer that is on top is to tap and hold on the checkbox, and then everything else will automatically be hidden. So this is the final copy. I'm going to just move it to center it on my canvas just so I can look and see if there's anything else I would want to change. One thing I did do as I was going is I made this Y a little bit taller right here because it just seemed like the space was a little empty. So there's always things that you can do to continue tweaking. Like one thing I'm noticing right now, another option for this
area could be having this T come out farther to the right, something like that, or even loop back around. See how that looks. So it's really fun to play around with these shapes and fit them together. It's almost like a puzzle, trying to make them fit together and see what shapes they make when you combine. And when you do combine things, like having this descender go into the TH, then you can get some really neat effects where you are actually interlocking the lines of text and making the piece look even more cohesive.
Thank you again for joining our iPad flourishing lesson. We hope you learned a lot and that you can incorporate what you learned into your own flourishing work. If you're ready to get started with the stamps, just look below the video to get your copy, and don't forget that you also get our in-depth user guide that gives you tons of tips and tricks and support along the way. Yes, you're going to love it. Thank you again. We hope you're thinking of lots of ideas for how you can use beautiful flourishes in your work to help it stand out, and we know that this product will help you save the time and frustration that you may be experiencing with flourishing so that you can stop feeling like that and get started with creating something beautiful. Yep, we cannot wait for you to try them out and see what you create.